listeners, it's Jana. Welcome back to Grief Out Loud. I've got a warning for you. If you email me and you ask if I would consider doing an episode on a specific topic, there's a very good chance I'm going to ask you to be the guest to help to create that episode. That's exactly what happened to Hilary when she emailed me to ask if I had thought about doing an episode on what it's like when your sibling gets diagnosed with an illness that eventually ends their life and you weren't one of their primary caregivers. I said, of course, that sounds like a really important episode, and how about you be the one to share your story about that experience? So I'm just saying, if you do email me, don't be surprised if you end up on the show one day. When Hilary thinks about her oldest sister, Kelly, she remembers crafting together, scrapbooking, sewing, and other creative pursuits that gave them protected pockets of time for just the two of them. When Kelly was diagnosed with a rare cancer during Hilary's senior year of high school, everything changed at once. Hilary was navigating school, a fog of uncertainty, and the growing awareness that her sister would not survive. Not long after Kelly died, Hilary left for college, and her parents divorced. During those early years, she felt unmoored and tried to just be a quote-unquote normal college student, but she was doing so in a world that felt really upside down. Now in her 30s, Hilary has the language to talk about what she couldn't really name or describe back when she was 18. And she uses those words to talk about how her grief resurfaces in unexpected ways and how it shows up differently with each developmental stage. As a therapist, she also brings that hard-earned understanding into her work with others. Hilary and I talk about Kelly, about the grief that continues to shift over time, and how grief can change when we finally have the words to better articulate and understand our experience. Okay, here's our conversation. Hilary, thank you for joining me for this conversation on Grief Out Loud.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about Kelly. What kind of older sister was she to you?
So Kelly was a little over 5 years older than me. And so what I would say to my middle sister, Jennifer, is that I already have two moms and I don't need three, whenever she would try and do the big sister things. But I think that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind whenever I think about my relationship with her, is just the fact that she was the oldest one is a pretty big part of that for me. That being 5 years older was a really good age gap, in that I was younger enough that it didn't feel like I should be exactly on level with her. So she just had a lot more patience and a lot more like, okay, I'm going to meet you where you're at kind of thing with me. That kind of grew into more friendship as we got older. But there was this sense of, yeah, this is kind of somebody who really wants to connect with me and protect me and do all the nurturing things, because she really enjoyed that. Although that was just kind of who Kelly was as a person. Ton of just caretaking and really loved that. If it was somebody who's like, hey, who's going to make you your birthday cake or take you out for ice cream when you're sad or whatever it is, that's the role that Kelly was going to fill. She was definitely my creativity buddy. She and I used to do a lot of crafts together. We did a lot of scrapbooking together and a lot of making cards together. And that was kind of both our connecting time and this is how we get one-on-one time, because that was a thing that we enjoyed that nobody else did. So that was something that Jennifer hated then and hates now. And it stresses her out, so she didn't want to come. And then later on, when Kelly got married, that was the way that we got time. That was just the two of us without her husband there, because he didn't get it either. So we enjoyed doing that together. And also she was just really good at that she was good at sewing. She could pretty much pick anything up and make it. I still have some Christmas ornaments that she made us. So that was a connection point that we had a lot of the time. She was a really contemplative person, to be a very deep thinker. Was very connected with her faith, and that was really important to her. She was very, very smart. That she didn't really care about this, but got National Merit Scholar. It was in the top 1% of people taking the PSAT, and you wouldn't necessarily know that in talking to her. She wasn't like, oh, let me go off on all the nerdy things. But if you got onto a topic that she really enjoyed, she knew a lot and she was really quick with that. And so that was really fun just to get to see energy and interest in things, because once she got interested in something, she dove really deep into it. But mostly what I think of with her is just that one-on-one connection and that like lots of nurturing caretaking space with her.
And that protected crafting time because nobody else wanted to do it with you.
Yeah. Like, this is how we make everybody go away.
When you think back to the time when Kelly was diagnosed, what do you remember about how you first learned about it and what those early kind of days and weeks felt like for you?
Um, the way that we learned about it was a little bit in stages. So she had been kind of sick, and it was one of those times where she was having a lot of tests and they weren't really sure what was going on. They thought that she had fibroids, which is not really a big deal, but would have been really unusual for her age. We were kind of waiting on, she was supposed to have surgery to take those out, and then got a call saying, nope, this is not what we thought it was. We don't really know what it is. We know it's bad, but that's all we got. So that one, I very much remember where I was at home, and just that was the okay, we went from where we were to 4 hours away where she was living, just to be there, but didn't really know what was happening. And that was the okay, this might be, at that point they thought uterine or ovarian cancer, and those have very different rates of survival and treatment. And so really weren't sure if this was this is bad, but it's going to be okay, or this is bad, but it's not. So that part was a really hard hit, but also was kind of a waiting space where we just sort of went up there and we're like, okay, we're here. Don't really know what to do. It was also a little weird because I had just gotten two of my wisdom teeth out the day before. And so what I remember on that is I was on pain meds still, and it's a little hazy to me. But that was just we're sort of doing this weird family meetup for a few days. I had to start school, and so I came back home with my dad, and my mom and my other sister stayed up there. And when they did the surgery, that's when we learned what it actually was. And what it actually is called desmoplastic small round cell tumors, which was not something I'd absolutely ever heard of, and was kind of something that I got used to explaining to people when you first say it, because it's a mouthful and nobody knows what it is. But when I first heard that, what I was told by, like, my mom was the one who told me about that. And she basically said, there's really nothing that they can do about it. That this is something that doesn't respond to chemo, doesn't respond to radiation. Like, they take out the tumors, but by the time you notice them, they've spread somewhere in your body. And there's just a question of like, okay, people don't live beyond 5 years. But until that, we don't know. So I don't know if I really consider like the first time we heard, oh, this is malignant, or the time we heard what it was to be the actual point of diagnosis, because they both kind of hit in different ways. The memories with that are honestly really foggy, that I remember being told that stuff, and then it's like, oh, I didn't take that in at all. That there's no sense of I was processing this as reality. It was just, that's not something I can wrap my head around. So I'm just kind of going to keep on doing what I'm normally doing because I don't know what else to do. I was in my senior year of high school, and I was only taking 2 classes in high school and most of them community college classes. And my CC classes hadn't started yet. So I had a lot of time at home, and I was doing my homework like really, really in a detailed way that I did not need to be doing. Effort that I never would have put in, because I just needed something to do. So I think there was a lot of feeling really foggy at first and just not knowing what to do with it. I remember people asking how she was doing and not knowing how to describe that, because she had just had really, really big surgery, that they took out 2 tumors and one was the size of a cantaloupe. So she was recovering from the surgery, but she wasn't going to recover. And that was a really hard thing to explain.
Especially as a senior in high school, talking to peers and other folks. And it sounds like one of your main ways of responding was to like really focus on homework and assignments and sort of these detailed things that you could do.
Yeah, that was this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Let me make sure that I'm not making any other waves kind of response. So I think I just kind of did my normal thing. But it was in a very shut down, I don't know how to talk about this kind of way.
Yeah, like that, and especially for it to be such a rare diagnosis, something most people have never heard of before, and to have to
Hmm.
try to explain that to people.
Yeah. I think I don't think that I realized this at the time, but when I think about it now, I kind of learned how to explain that diagnosis in one breath. That I'm like, my sister has cancer. This is what it is. It does not respond to anything. We don't know how long it's going to be. Okay, that's the whole story. So there wasn't a space for people to ask, like, well, what are they going to do? And what exactly does that mean? Because it was almost easier to just say it all at once than let people ask when it was all really bad news.
Yeah. How did people usually respond when you would share that, like such a succinct way of saying, like, my sister's not going to survive this diagnosis?
Generally, just get real quiet. That I don't think that the way that I said it really lent itself to conversation, but also there was just a sense of, oh, there's not really anything else that I can say that came with that. So kind of depended where we were or where I was for that. That if it was people that knew my family, maybe people in the church that I grew up in, there was a lot of, how is she doing? How are your parents doing with that? With people who just knew me, those were mostly people my own age who kind of froze up. So I got used to, okay, I need to continue this conversation because it didn't really feel fair to expect them to know how to.
Yeah. So you were doing a lot of the work, not only figuring out how to say it to not necessarily invite conversation, but then also to continue some other type of conversation to
Yeah.
help with other people not knowing what to do or how to respond to you.
Yeah. And I don't think I felt like people should know. I think there was a sense of, I don't know what the right response is to that. I'm not convinced there is a right response to that. So I'm not going to put a lot of pressure on you to come up with one. And also, just the way that people talked got a little annoying in terms of like the, well, how's your sister doing? Really soft, like very tentative was really uncomfortable. And so I'm like, let me just try and prevent that as much as I can because I'm really bad at responding to that.
I think that's such an important point of clarification too, that a lot of times people can get caught up on like, well, what do I say and what do I not say? And so much of it ends up being less about the words and more about the tone, the approach, the demeanor that somebody brings into that conversation, and that hesitancy, that sort of, oh, this is fragile and you're fragile and I'm going to maybe whisper a little bit, can be unsettling or unnerving for someone.
Yeah. And I already knew what was happening. So I'm going, you don't actually need to be this nervous about asking me, although some of these are really difficult questions to answer because they're supposed to have like basic answers that aren't there. If you say, how is somebody doing? And there is no up and down with treatment, there's also no good response to that.
Yeah. Yeah. What do I even actually say if you do ask me that
Yeah.
question? You mentioned that Kelly lived a few hours away and she was married at the
Mhm.
time. How did the distance and kind of where each of you were in your lives impact the relationship you had and the connection that you had during that year that she was dealing with being sick?
I think that's something that took me a really long time to come up with any language around, because for a long time, I didn't really understand why I kind of connected with people who had lost people in accidents or in like really sudden ways. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. That didn't happen. But in the sense that being given that kind of diagnosis was you get this news all in one day, it sort of did. And so I think there was just this marker of, okay, our relationship isn't going to be the same after this because I don't know how to settle into space with her. That part was really tough. And I think that was kind of more true when we first learned she was sick and then really close to her death. Like it wasn't as true in the middle of the year, but there was just a sense of, oh, I don't know what to do that I'd never experienced around her before. Because normally she was somebody that I settled in with probably more than anybody else.
So there was almost an awkwardness that came up between the two of you, at least at the beginning with the diagnosis and
Hmm.
towards the end of her life. And that was new and unusual.
Yeah. And just not knowing what to do around her really not feeling good because just recovery from that big of surgery is really uncomfortable. And I think at 18, like I knew that, but I didn't know how to be in the room with somebody who was feeling that bad. Um, all the normal things that we talked about didn't make sense. I think too, it's interesting in looking at my relationship with my other sister and just the pattern that this went through that this wasn't going to be a particularly connected time in terms of how much we saw each other and how much we talked. Like teach adolescent development. So I get a little bit distracted with the theory of just going, right, this is push away from your family time. And probably would have come back in a way more normal way if we'd had more time. But just going right before then was not a time that I was talking to her a whole ton. They had just moved actually from Louisiana back up to Ohio. So I was excited because I thought I was going to be able to see her more. There is this weird sense of, yeah, we hadn't spent a ton of time together immediately prior to that, and that should have been okay, except that it wasn't.
Yeah, that if there had been more time for that ebb and that flow to come unfold naturally, you would have likely
Hmm.
come back together once you had
Yeah.
a different developmental stage in your life, but it got cut
Yeah.
short.
And just going, when you think of somebody who's been married for a year and a half, you don't think, oh, yeah, they totally are branching out and spending tons of extra time with other people. Like, this is usually a be at home with your spouse a lot more kind of time. And it certainly was for them. And I think that was a challenge for Kelly and her husband, too, was kind of figuring out, okay, how much do we want people here? And how much are we trying to protect our time? And like, what does that look like for us? So they ended up kind of just making a soft boundary of like, yeah, let's have people on weekends and just us during the week for a lot of the time that she was sick, just to make it any sort of normal rhythm for them. And I think that and living that far away and being in school kind of played into how much I was there too.
What was it like for you, Hilary, when it came very close to the end of Kelly's life?
I was actually at camp for the vast majority of that time. So that weighed really heavily into it. And there's always kind of mixed feelings there because there's part of me that's so glad that I wasn't there day to day. And there's also a piece of, okay, you weren't there day to day. That really just doesn't feel good. But I was working at the camp that I went to growing up, and Kelly and I had talked about that prior to me applying for that job. That I was like, really, are you okay with this? And she's like, this is what you've always wanted to do. Why would you not do that? That's stupid. Which was really helpful to have in my head. Um, because like she knew that she was relapsing and she's getting more tired. She's still like, that's where you need to be. But at the same time, there was this weird mix of I'm working sleepaway camp, and so I've got kids with me. I've got 1 hour off per day. Like I am fully in the world of summer camp, which I love so much. And was really excited and happy to be there. And also, anytime I'm checking my email or my phone, I'm bracing myself, going, I don't know what I'm stepping into. It was a really strange mix of trying to figure out what do I do with that sense of pressure that's not there most of the day, except when it's like crashing in a little bit. And looking back and going, my director, who's my boss, knew about it, and a couple of the upper level members of staff knew about it, and nobody else knew until the 6th week of the summer. So I kind of kept those cards pretty close to my chest, in part just because of some of the dynamics of what was going on at camp. With I was switching sites some, but I didn't know how to say, hey, this is the pressure that I'm living with, and how to talk about it with other people who were like 18 to 21. So I kind of just went, people who need to know. And if I need to do anything about that, I will. But I think there was a sense of, I'm looking at this like a job and I need to keep on going with it, that there wasn't really grace in my head for, I might need to fall apart sometimes, and that actually would be pretty reasonable.
Yeah, so in a sense, you spent that summer almost living in two different worlds, even though physically you were in one, which is mostly
Yeah.
at camp. But some part of your mind and your heart was always reserved for with maybe Kelly and your family, but then no space in the day to day to have that be expressed to other people.
Yeah. And I think I didn't really understand at 18 just how close we were to the time that she died because she had been on hospice since that January and she died in August. I knew that that meant that they weren't really trying to treat anything, but I didn't really get that people do palliative medical procedures. And I think either that point made sense, so nobody thought to tell me that that didn't actually mean things weren't bad, or just they kind of thought that I knew that. But they were doing some stuff with like she had a lot of fluid overload that they were taking care of like right before she died. And I think I kind of took that as, oh, they're still doing stuff, so we're not that close. Just because I didn't fully understand it.
Do you think if you had fully understood, you would have made different choices, or do you think you would have made the same choices?
I think as far as mostly not being there, I probably would have made the same choices. The couple of weekends before she died have always felt a little tricky because I didn't go see her. And I think if I would have known, I probably would have gone. And at the same time, having run through that in my head however many dozens of times, like that was some space that I really, really needed the weekend before she died when I didn't know what was happening. I'm kind of torn on that one. I think part of me wishes that I would have known, and part of me is glad that I didn't, um, because I think it would have been really hard to get any kind of rest had I known that. And at the same time, I missed out on some time that I could have had.
I'm appreciating your ability to sit in the both and of that, that both of those things maybe can be true. Because so often it seems like folks are real quick to just hold themselves overly accountable, inequitably accountable for something that
Yeah.
maybe, looking back and having some perspective to be like, maybe that even if I did know, I still would have made a similar choice.
Yeah. And I think that kind of took a long time to get to, that is perspective in my 30s, not perspective in my 20s at all.
Right. Another big shift in your world was pretty soon after Kelly died. Your parents got divorced. And I
Mhm.
wonder what it was like to be 18 and maneuvering two really big losses.
I think I kind of just don't separate my parents' divorce from me starting college because that happened so close to the same time. That not counting when they actually divorced, I'm counting when one person left the house, and that was the day after they dropped me off at college. So in that sense, like it kind of just felt like, okay, I'm thrown into an entirely new situation all at once. And there had been a lot of tension between my parents prior to their splitting up. And that's always, I feel like I had to explain a lot more about that when I was younger and was talking about it more often. But I'm saying, okay, my parents divorced after my sister died, not because my sister died, because I think that's a pretty common thing. Okay, people grieve differently and they don't connect very well, and that can push people apart. And I'm like, no, that had already happened. I don't think it helped, but that's not what caused it. So there was a sense of, okay, I've got to be able to be okay at school because I really, really don't want to go home. And I know whenever I talk to anybody at college about it, often the first response was kind of, what are you doing here? Because it had been such a short amount of time. And my gut reaction is, thing is better than hanging with your grieving divorced parents. Like, that's a horrible place to be. I will not be doing that. Thank you very much. Like, didn't go home for fall break that year, just really wanted to stay really far away from it. More retrospectively, as I've looked back, I've just gone, that's a space where I felt like I didn't really have a pad to launch off of. That when I think about, okay, when you leave home, there's this kind of tagging back that you do of, okay, I'm going to go back and it's going to feel normal. And like Christmas is sort of this reunion thing that just really never happened. So there was kind of this sense of that's when a bomb hit. And then it was all just never the same after that. And at the same time, I kind of hit the same thing that I did in talking about her diagnosis of just saying, here's all the things that have gone on. I'm okay to talk about it. Like, don't back off just because I just told you all this basically in one breath. But that was a tricky way to start college because, like, everybody's jumping into college already feeling vulnerable and okay, I don't know anybody and how do I get to know people? And one of the things that I hit the most often was siblings are usually a pretty safe question. And so people will say like, well, how many siblings do you have? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that. And just learning how to navigate in that moment of I'm trying to decide how long and how well I'm going to know you in order to give a question that is typically a one-word answer. Um, because I don't want to say one. But also, if I say two and you ask me more questions, we're going to get here real quick. So there was a lot of just mental work that came into getting to know new people. I think that's why all my friends were sophomores for a while there, is because becoming friends with other people that were feeling really unstable just was not working for me.
Mm.
So I was going with the people that already kind of had their feet under them at college. I'm just going to hang around you because you don't seem to be feeling crazy, and I've got all the crazy I can handle in my own head here. There were a few people who knew, and that was hugely helpful. And I think that has been interesting to me in just thinking about like some of the later writing about teen stuff that I've done and looking at what do I think about like giving out that news. Oftentimes, what I hear is let people tell other people in their own way. And I go, oh, I'm so glad I didn't have to tell everybody. I was in honors college, and our honors college, like program coordinator knew what was going on. And she told a few of the other students, and she told the honors director. Like, she didn't tell everybody, but she went to a couple of people that she knew well and went, hey, this is what this girl's coming in with. She's going to need some stuff. And that is probably the most helpful thing anybody ever did for me.
That you didn't have to be the one to say it or explain it, that
Yeah.
someone did that pre-work for you.
Yeah, that there was a safety net there and I didn't have to make it for myself was really, really important to me. Would have been really helpful had she told me that she did that, because we had a couple of real awkward conversations where I didn't know that people knew. But it was helpful that they knew. And it helped that they didn't expect me to always be acting like everything was fine in those first few weeks, especially.
To have just at least a few people who had a window in
Yeah.
that you didn't have. And you didn't have to like embrace or get worried, like, how am I going to tell them if it comes up? Because they already knew, and opens up a little bit more spaciousness in that connection.
Yeah. I didn't have to explain when I was already having a bad day. I'm just like, hey, this is a rough day for this. And a couple of people already knew that.
Speaking of relationships with other people, how has Kelly's death changed your relationship with your other sister, Jennifer, the third mother you said you did not need?
Yeah. She so much want to do that. I kind of feel bad for her now because I'm like, yeah, you didn't really get to be an older sibling. I didn't give you any permission. I think at first we really didn't know how to talk to each other about it because we processed it really differently. So she was up with Kelly a lot when she was sick. And I think she either felt more comfortable or faked feeling more comfortable around being with Kelly when she was really sick. And so she had a pretty different experience than I did in terms of what she saw and which parent she was with and all that stuff. And I think we really didn't know how to talk about that. And at the same time, when we were both home, there was the sense of, okay, this is the person who's on my team, trying to navigate holidays and trying to figure out, okay, who are we staying with and when are we going over to other places and that kind of thing. She was the other person that I was doing that with. So there was kind of that link there too. She met my other brother-in-law very soon after this happened. I think that came into play because probably about the time that maybe we would have talked more because we weren't in the first throes of it, then there was kind of another big change. It wasn't like we ever had a problem with each other at all, but I think we didn't really kind of come back together as much until the first time that she got pregnant. And then it was like, oh, hey, this is something that I really, really want to be involved in. And I kind of got on more sure footing with her from there. In my mind, at least, there's a really big shift around the time of she miscarried that first baby, but around that pregnancy and then around my nephew's pregnancy and his birth, that I'm like, oh, this is stuff that I know how to do. And this is kind of a space that I can come back into and know what role I'm supposed to play here. And that just opened up way more doors for us to get into more of an adult relationship with each other. We're good friends now. Like, that's a really good space. But I think it took a while, and I'm not sure how much of that was we were both coming out of this family situation and didn't have any words for it, and how much of that was just we were figuring out how not to be like the younger two siblings who grew up together and how to be adults who are actually friends.
Yeah. So there's some pretty like natural, normal developmental shifts again in your relationship within the context of such big loss going on as well. Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking, Hilary, it's like Kelly dies, you go off to college, your parents get divorced, and you have a distance in your relationship with your sister Jennifer that it's sounding and feeling a bit like that those college years you may have felt pretty on your own.
Yeah, I think I kind of just didn't know how to connect with other people around this stuff during college. So there were people who were there if I really needed them, but also I felt really hesitant about that. And that's actually been really interesting. A good friend of mine from college and I started talking a lot more about this at that time. And the feedback that I'm getting from her is that I barely talked about this at all. And I'm like, that's not what I remember. And it's interesting to hear it from her because she is a person that I very much trusted and opened up to more in college. So I'm going, if Ashley thinks I didn't talk, I really didn't talk because nobody would have heard that if she didn't hear it. My mental image of that time is that was all up in my head all the time. And other people who were very much there and cared about me are like, you tried so hard not to talk about it, even when anybody could see you weren't okay, that I think I was just really trying to act like, nope, I'm a normal college student. I'm fine. I've adjusted to this in ways that really weren't true for a while.
It's wild, right? To think it was probably the biggest thing going on in your mind. And
Hmm.
so for you, like, of course, I must have been sharing and expressing it with everyone. And then to find out, oh, no, that really literally was just in my mind. Like, I was
Yeah.
not sharing that with other folks.
Yeah. Or just my mental image of what would have been normal, was really skewed. And so I didn't talk about it because I felt like I should have been more okay than I was. And so I'm like, okay, I got through that first year. Everybody says the first year is the worst one. I kind of should be done talking about it now. And that's not how I experienced it at all. I think the second year was a lot worse than the first year. Um, because in the first year, everything is kind of weird and people expect it to be weird. That if you do that first Christmas after somebody dies, nobody thinks, oh, did you have a fun Christmas vacation? They're like, okay, yeah, you were dealing with this. But once it kind of gets back to normal, when everything still felt off, then I'm like, oh, it's not going to get back to normal. And I think that's when that really sunk in. And so I had a way harder time dealing with that as a sophomore, I think, than I did as a freshman because I was expecting it to be okay. And I assumed everybody else was too. And so I really didn't tell anybody that I wasn't okay.
So, in a sense, you went even more underground than you might have been your freshman
Uh,
year by the time
yeah.
you got to your sophomore year. You've started to talk about this a little bit, but looking back, I mean, you're 36 now. It's 18 years since Kelly
Hmm.
died. What else have you learned about well, sort of like how is your understanding of Kelly's illness and her death and the impact on you? Like, how has that shifted over time?
Um, I think there's been a lot of changes in part just because of getting older, in part because of the job that I do, that I'm a therapist and I went through all of that training after she died. And so there's this weird sense of, okay, this is the lens through which I view pain because that's the biggest thing that's happened to me. So in terms of processing that and then figuring out how to sit with other people in that, I think like that's something that's kind of present for me all the time. I think one thing that I got that I really didn't understand at the time is it's not necessarily like you can't compare your loss to anybody else's, but your loss can be as bad as somebody else's in a very different way. That I think at first there was this sense of, okay, yes, she died, but we had a lot of warning about that. And so I should have done some anticipatory grieving and I should have been more okay by the time that she died because we had some mourning. And I think I kind of always heard from other people, not really directly, but like, okay, it's better if it's not a shock because at least then you have some time to work through it. You still have time to talk to them. And I'm like, yeah, but also you have some really bad memories and some other stuff that you then have to deal with of the process of waiting on this that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And I think it took a long time to get any language for I can say, hey, this was really bad in a different way than this other thing that happened to somebody else that was really bad. And I'm not devaluing anybody's experience by doing that. That it's just saying this is how it hit for me. The first time that I learned, I don't know any other like non-lingo way to say this, but the concept of developmental renegotiation, just the idea that you process things differently as you hit new developmental stages. And I'm like, well, that sucks. I'm never going to be done with it. Like, it was just this, oh, I'm screwed kind of sense that came in there. I don't think it quite feels that way now, but there was this piece of going, I didn't realize because I was technically a young adult at the time that she died that I would process that differently at different periods of my life. That there's a sense of, okay, I was 18 and that was that gut punch and that was all of college, but also what do I do with she wasn't here for grad school and she doesn't know me as a counselor and she like doesn't know me as an adult. What do I do with looking at my relationship with Jennifer and going, I wish I would have known what that would have been like with Kelly because we didn't get to go through that. And sometimes it's just going, this is going to hit randomly and there's not really anything that I can do about that. Like, I had a rabbit for 9 years, a very long lived rabbit. And I am not a person who's like, my pet is my baby at all. I love my rabbit. He's super cute, but like, it was pretty chill. And then he died and I got a new one. And when I got the new one, I just had like a meltdown day where I'm like, my sister's never going to meet my rabbit and she never met my old one. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, this is not a thing that I was expecting out of this baby bunny in my house. And so, like, just kind of getting used to that's going to be a thing. And that's actually okay. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the way that I'm processing it. It's just sort of a new thing instead of defining this as something that is supposed to just get progressively better over time and that's it. And going, yeah, there's going to be ups and downs here. Learning how to connect with people on that took me a long time, in part because of just the way that people try and connect when you first lose somebody, that sometimes you get that experience of somebody going, I know how you feel because my grandma died. And I don't even know that that actually happened to me, but I kind of bristled at the idea and then going, nope, nobody gets this because this is a really different kind of death. That just the idea that this is my sibling was not supposed to die, wasn't something that I knew how to put any words to. And I didn't know how to say, I'm really sorry about your grandma. That's not the same as my sister, without being like, it sounds like I don't care that your grandma died. It was important for me to get some language around that out of order death made a difference to me, and just how young I was when it happened made a difference, and how young she was, and that really does mean different things as far as processing it. I think there's a lot more space in my head for that now. There was something that I read, I think in college sometime, that was talking about just how people process different kinds of death and was saying when you lose a child, it's loss of present and future. And when you lose a parent, it's loss of present and past. And when you lose a sibling, it's loss of past, present, and future. And that was really helpful language to me to just go, okay, this is partially childhood stuff, and this is partially now, and this is partially things that she should have been here for in the future. And I didn't really know how to say that at that point. So just kind of wrapping my head around some of the bigger stuff took a while. Um, and just giving myself space for this is going to hit differently at different points in my life. I actually had somebody that I was seeing at work. We were talking about this. Her family member's really sick. And also she had lost a family member pretty early. there was a moment really late in like one of the last times that I saw her where we said there need to be support groups for like 10 years out that are like they're still dead kind of support groups. And we're like, that's it's really messed up, but it's still true. Um, and just that sense of this is going to hit differently after a long time. And sometimes it hits differently just feeling that it's been a long time. Um, just that sense of, okay, I kind of feel like it should feel better. And also, there's a really big gap now that is a different thing that I'm having to work through.
Like how much of your life you have lived without her can
Yeah.
bring its own unique way of thinking about it and grieving about it.
Yeah. And I think just doing things now that I think she really would have enjoyed. I learned how to bake bread this year. And that's something that I go, man, Kelly would have loved that. Like, that's totally something that she would have done with me and would have had a lot of fun with. And there's different pieces that I didn't really expect to miss as I'm getting into new spaces where I think she probably would have liked that too.
I'm so appreciating how, in explaining your own experience, Hilary, you're giving so many people, or giving people who are listening, so much permission to not think they did something wrong, that they're still grieving new things. Because I always think about like, you can't, there's no way you could have grieved Kelly not being there for the birth of your nephew because
Mm,
that wasn't happening when she was alive. And so you couldn't have anticipated grieving that until you actually lived into that experience without her there. And to take that pressure off of ourselves of like, well, I should have been able to like anticipate everything I'm going to grieve in the future and grieve it all out in the first couple of years so I don't experience it 10, 15, 20 years later.
yeah. And just knowing that there's no real way to guess what's going to hit. Like, okay, yeah, there were milestones that she's missed that I've been like, man, I wish she would have been here. And it doesn't feel like a huge thing. And then there are other ones that feel pretty random. That I go, oh, that one hit. Okay, not really sure why today, but all right. And I think that was a really long process to be able to say, this is hard to explain, but I'm still feeling it today. I think I'm a lot better than I was about 10 years ago. Now at saying it's okay to just let things hit how they hit and not always know why they're hitting this way, or why one thing hits a lot harder than another.
You got to make space for the baking bread grief that could catch you off guard that you don't know is coming.
Yeah. And also knowing some days I bake bread and it feels really good. And there's a sense of like, oh, I feel really connected to her. And some days I bake bread and I'm like, this is stupid. I just want to talk to her about this. And it's the same bread. Like, I don't know what the difference is. That's just my brain.
Well, Hilary, as we come to the end of our conversation, is there anything else that you want to share with me, with our listeners, about Kelly, about grief, about how you work with grief?
Um, I think there was a lot in my own group experience where I didn't understand that I was supposed to feel crazy and I was supposed to feel tired, and that there was so much going on in my head that now when I work with people who are grieving, one of my first comments is grief makes you stupid, because you just can't think straight. And so many of the people around me are like, well, I can't do things I normally do. And I'm like, yeah, that will go away, but that's legit right now. And I don't think that I understood that at the time, and that would have been really helpful to know. And just that it's exhausting. I think I really didn't give myself enough space for how much that mental space was going to take up physical energy and how much it was going to take up mental energy, and just how big of an impact it was going to have on my relationships and on my connections with people. I think the other thing that has been a really mixed bag for me is seeing how this is a connecting piece for me with some other people. That the one client that I'm making really dark humor jokes with, is somebody that I connected with really easily. And that was somebody that I shared, hey, this is something that happened to me because that's most of what I was working out of. I'm like, yes, there are theories behind what I'm doing, but also a lot of what I'm talking through is just this is what I know from having gone through it. And I know I've had like I did medical camp for a couple of years, and there's a siblings week, and there happened to be one kid who had lost her sister and then had come to camp, which is really unusual because typically the kids that are there are the siblings of the other kids that are there that summer. So I think this was the only time that happened. And she and I had a link just because I told her that.
Mm.
And so there was this sense of, hey, you're not the only one in the room that this happened to. And just holding the complication of, man, I wish that wasn't true for me. And man, I wish that wasn't true for the person I'm talking to. And I'm really thankful for that redemptive space of being able to say, okay, you're not the only one that this happened to. That doesn't have to feel only good or bad. That I can see really good stuff come out of it and wish that it never happened and not kind of have to reconcile those and decide which one's more true.
And not have to decide which one's more true. Yeah, that it's not a competition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Hilary, thank you for sharing with me and our listeners about Kelly and about all the ways that your grief has changed and shifted over the years. And most importantly, you mentioned so many times, like, I didn't have language for it then, and all the work you've done to find the language for it now to help others be able to learn from your language to find their own words to express their grief. So thank you for talking with me today for Grief Out Loud.
Yeah, thanks.
And listeners out there, you know I say this each and every single time, but thank you for being part of our listening community, for tuning in, for sharing the show with people who might be interested in or helped in some way by what we are talking about. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at griefoutloud@dougy.org. That's DOUGY.org. That's our main website where you can find information about our local programming, our free downloadable resources, and of course, each and every episode of Grief Out Loud. Always excited to share that the podcast is sponsored in part by the Chester Steffen Endowment Fund. Grief Out Loud is a production of Dougy Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.